Now I want to take a slight turn and talk about this same process, but I'm going to tell the story a little bit differently. And in doing this, I am going to change one of the assumptions, what turns out to be an important assumption of the model. Okay, it's important in the sense that it's, in the terminology we've been using previously, it's a consequential assumption, because when we change this assumption, it's going to change the results that we depict in this particular model. Now, the assumption I'm going to change is the assumption of perfect information. So I'm going to change it to imperfect information in a particular way. Now, be aware that the imperfect or perfect information assumption applies to a lot of different things. And one of the things that it applies to, for example, is that firms have to know when other firms are making positive profits or not. Okay, but perfect information also applies, for example, to consumers knowing the quality of the goods that they're purchasing from the firms and being assured that the quality they expect is exactly the quality that they're receiving. So bear in mind that this assumption of perfect information has a lot of applications, or I should say, a lot of ways in which it gets incorporated into the model itself. And I'm just going to change one aspect of the perfect information assumption in the following exercise. As a result, we are going to be moving just a step away from a perfectly competitive market economy, because perfect competition requires, for the results we're showing previously, it requires that all of these assumptions are being maintained at the same time. Now I'm going to change one of the assumptions and see what happens. Okay, so here's the story now. Let's suppose that one firm amongst the many firms that are producing in this perfectly competitive market, one firm experiences a cost reduction. And we're going to imagine that it happens because of a technological breakthrough. Okay, so this one firm producing coffee comes up with a better mechanism to produce coffee, and they can produce the coffee more cheaply. Maybe it's new machinery that they put into the harvesting of coffee beans. Maybe it's some technology that enables them to get a greater yield for their product, with the same amount of inputs that they had before. It's some sort of change in idea in the way in which they produce coffee that enables them to produce coffee at a lower cost. Okay, so it's not changes in input prices that are affecting every firm out there in the market. This is just a change that's affecting one of the firms because they've come up with a great new idea. Okay? Now, the assumption of perfect information that we make in the model itself is assuming really that when that new innovation is arising for a particular firm, that all of the firms get the breakthrough at the same time, because the breakthrough has to drop the average cost curves for all of the firms. If we say the firms are all identical and there's a new innovation, then we're saying all of the firms get the new innovation at the same time. And that's what's going to drop all of the average cost curves simultaneously. Okay, but what if not? What if all of the other firms don't get the same breakthrough? What if the other firms don't know the innovative technique that this one firm has discovered? Well, what would be the incentives and the behavior of the individual firm that's come up with the breakthrough, we could ask. All right, and we're going to remember that what this firm wants to do, presumably, is to maximize its profitability. All right, so now let's go back to this diagram real quick. We go to this diagram. What's happening is for one firm, we're getting this happening. Okay, so one firm is getting a drop in their average cost curves, but no other firm is getting it whatsoever. All right, and remember, in the assumptions of perfect competition, this one firm is too small to have any influence that takes place in the market. So if this one firm experiences a drop in cost, what's it going to do? Well, first of all, the price is going to stay at P1, because even though this firm has got a drop in costs, they're going to still be able to get the price P1 in the marketplace. Their costs have now dropped to this level, and so that means that this individual firm is going to be able to make this area here as profits. It's going to be positive profits that are accruing to this one firm. Now, they increase their output just a little bit from Q1 to Q2, but that increase in output, again, by assumption of the model, is too little to make any influence over the market supply. So the market supply stays fixed right here, but this firm enjoys positive profits. All right, now what would happen next? Well, we would say, well, according to the model, this information about the new technology ought to be transmitted to the other firms, right? But what would be the incentive of the individual firm, we might ask? This one firm can sit there and make positive profits indefinitely, but only if it doesn't let out the new information, only if it doesn't let other coffee firms know its new innovative technique that's enabling it to lower its costs. So here we have a situation where we now have profit being accrued to a particular industry. They're doing well, but they're going to keep this hidden from the other firms. They don't want this information to be freely disseminated because it's going to get in the hands of their competitors, and their competitors are going to follow suit, and they're going to bring the price of the product down in the marketplace, right? So the incentive of the firm is keep the information secret. New technologies have to be kept out of the hands of competitor firms if you want to maintain these profits. Now, I also want to highlight a term. We often use the term economic rents to describe profit that is kind of unearned, that is not the profit that you would get in a perfectly competitive setting. So here, the firm is getting, economists would call economic rents, what we would also call monopoly-like rents, because it's got this special position in the marketplace. It's got the technology that nobody else knows about. And as a result, it's able to make some positive profits while it's keeping that information hidden from the others. Now, secrecy is something that is protected for individual firms, and we accept that in marketplaces. Usually we say, oh, if a firm's got a great idea, we understand they don't want other firms to know about it, and so we allow them to keep that secret, of course. And it's certainly in the incentive of firms to do that. But there's another way to do it. They could use the power of the government and apply for a patent. Patent is a type of intellectual property, and it's a way in which they can protect an innovation. And if you apply for and get a patent on a new machinery or technology that you're introducing into your coffee production process, well, then you're making that information public to everybody, but you're also at the same time restricting the usage of it and requiring that only the innovator of this new process is going to be able to enjoy the benefits that accrue, the profits that can be made on this particular technology. So what the government does with intellectual property protection is it gives an individual innovator monopoly privileges or rights and the ability to earn some economic rents for a limited period of time, although that limited period is about 20 years for innovations. Okay, now, what are the effects largely in the market as a result of this kind of behavior? Well, the one thing to recognize is that consumers are not going to benefit from the innovation in this particular story that I'm telling, because what the firm is going to do is to continue to follow the high market price, but to take those extra savings it's getting by the lower costs, and it's going to turn it completely into profits for itself. So they will argue, oh, innovation is good, we need to protect it, we need to do this, and it's good for the market. But what really would happen in this simple circumstance is that the firms don't really have an incentive to help out the consumers in this case. They want to maximize their profitability, and they can do so by keeping the information secret or protecting it with a patent and keeping it out of the hands of other competitors so that they can make profits in the meantime. They can do a little bit more with those profits too. So let me talk about a next step. What would you do as a firm with all of these extra profits that you're making in this monopoly position that you've got, in a sense? You don't really have a monopoly, remember, but you have a monopoly on the production process now that nobody else has available to them. And so therefore, you're able to make these rents, these profits in the short term because you've got this monopoly position on the inputs into the production process, on the information you need. Okay, well, step number one is one thing they can do. They could buy out other firms with the profits that they're making. So imagine you've got one little firm producing coffee and you've got this innovative technique. You could say, hey, well, why don't I go around the neighborhood and I'll buy up a bunch of farms from other farmers. And what I'll do is I'll introduce my technology into those production processes, keeping it secret, keeping it undercover still. But I'm going to be able to operate not one firm now, but 2, 5, 10, 100 firms. And with each of these firms that I can acquire with the profits I'm making, then I can acquire more firms. And with more firms, I can make more profit. Now, the more firms I get into my control, the closer I'm going to be able to establish a monopoly-like position in the market. And I'm going to be able to have a big enough firm that I can actually control the prices that prevail in the market and the quantities that get supplied in the market. And remember what happens as you have more concentration, more monopoly power, is that monopolies are going to respond by lowering their output to the market and raising up the price to consumers so as to increase their profitability. So the price for consumers now is not going to get driven down because of the technology improvement. Instead, the monopolization that can be created by these firms that are innovating can actually force the prices to consumers up, and more profits will accrue to the firms themselves. So we can see here that there is this process that can arise that enables an innovating firm to corner the market and to increasingly improve or expand its size in the market and get greater and greater profits or economic rents as a result of its position in the market. And all we've done is we've gotten rid of one little assumption about the transmissibility of information between individual firms. If we allow information to transmit instantaneously to all the firms, we get a result where the long-run outcome of innovation has to be a drop in the price and a benefit to consumers. But if you stop that free flow of information, you don't get a decrease in price. Instead, you're going to get a likely monopolization by a firm in the marketplace and a long-term increase in the price that would come about. All right, now, this is a different story than what we're telling in this classic market model. All right, so this is an adjustment. This is a step beyond. This is where we're relaxing assumptions and seeing how that assumption plays a critical role in determining what the outcome of the market would be. Okay, let me give you another possibility for the firms here. The firms can license the technology to other firms. All right, once they've gotten a patent on the product itself, this would be after a patent. So you've got the protection that's been given to you, monopoly protection that's been given to you by the government. And now you could say, well, I'm going to give my technology out, but I'm going to force the firms to pay for it. And what you could do is you could say, hey, if I give you this new technology, you're going to be able to increase your profits by 20%. And what I want is 10% of your profits, your extra profit. So you get a 20% increase. I'm going to take 10% and I'll give you the technology and license it to you for a period of time. All right, and that way is another way in which the firm itself can kind of acquire the monopoly profit that's being earned by other firms who have been given technology and the allowance to produce. And then the last couple of steps here I already explained. So if they merge a lot with lots of other firms, it's going to give them the ability to adjust the price and quantity and increase its profits further. Notice that non-innovating firms are slowly going to drop out of the market or be consumed up by the other firm who is innovating. So the technology innovator is going to start to dominate potentially in this market. This is great for business, bad for consumers. And it's going to be bad for the market outcome that we're going to describe and talk about a little bit later. Now, herein gets to an issue we're going to bring up. Firms have in their incentive to try to restrict the amount of competition that takes place. Firms hate perfect competition. They don't want to move to a process of perfect competition because it's going to reduce their profit in the extreme to zero, as we're representing here, which means they're going to be just like everybody else, making the same amount of wages that people make everywhere else. They're not going to make all this extra supernormal profit if they have to compete with other firms in the marketplace. So firms have become extremely smart in the way in which they've developed ways to try to concentrate their power and the profit that they can get from monopolization. And one of the ways they do that is through intellectual property protection. Okay, now there's some reasons for protecting intellectual property that are sound, such as maybe you need this in order to induce innovation to take place at all. Maybe you want to give firms a temporary monopoly position and monopoly profit so that they're inspired to innovate more and so that the economy can grow eventually. True, but at the same time, giving them monopoly protections like this with patents, keeping information secret from other firms, is having a deleterious negative effect upon the consumers and upon the market itself. What's good for business is not always good for consumers, and it's not always good for the market outcome itself. And that's an important thing that we should recognize, and it's something that economics can teach us.